Eye in the Door, 1993, is the second novel in Pat Barker's acclaimed Regeneration trilogy, which delves into the effects of shell shock, now recognized as PTSD, on British soldiers during World War I. This installment centers on Billy Pryor, a secondary character from the first book, Regeneration, while also featuring historical figures such as Siegfried Sassoon and Dr. William Rivers, who both played key roles in the previous novel. The trilogy's final book, The Ghost Road, won the 1995 Booker Prize, and the series as a whole is regarded as a major achievement in contemporary British literature. The novel begins with Billy Pryor's release from Craiglockhart Military Hospital, where he has been receiving treatment for shell shock from the brilliant but troubled Dr. Rivers. Though the war rages on, Pryor has been assigned to a Ministry of Munitions intelligence unit tasked with investigating the activities of pacifists in the UK. While his most intense symptoms have subsided, Pryor still experiences episodes of memory loss. Pryor is sent to interview Beatty Roper, a woman serving a life sentence for her alleged involvement in a plot to assassinate Prime Minister David Lloyd George. As a child, Pryor lived briefly with Beatty, and her daughter, Hetty, had been a close friend and romantic interest. The idea that Beatty could be part of an assassination scheme seems improbable to Pryor, and as he interviews her, he starts to suspect that she has been framed. Beatty insists that she was coerced into the plot by Lionel Spragg, a would-be deserter. However, Spragg tells a different story, claiming that the assassination plot was Beatty's idea. As Pryor digs deeper, he uncovers that Spragg works for the Ministry of Munitions. He concludes that the ministry might have set Beatty up, either as a scapegoat or because she was the weakest link in the pacifist network. Throughout the investigation, Pryor also becomes entangled in a brief sexual encounter with Captain Charles Manning, an upper-class government official and fellow shell shock survivor treated by Dr. Rivers. Manning is anxious and paranoid, and Pryor learns he is being blackmailed with threats of exposure over his homosexuality. Meanwhile, Pryor's memory lapses are becoming more frequent, and although he can continue functioning during these periods, he has no recollection of his actions. The investigation leads Pryor back to his hometown against Dr. Rivers' advice, where he interviews Hetty Roper. Pryor learns that Hetty's husband, Mac, whom he also knows from childhood, is vehemently anti-war, viewing the conflict as an act of government violence against its own people. Hetty claims to have no idea where Mac is, though it's clear that someone is living in her house. Pryor decides to visit a childhood spot for a walk, and there he meets Mac, who threatens him with violence if he betrays him to the authorities. Though unafraid, Pryor refuses to turn Mac in, as they share a deep history, and Pryor believes Mac is simply following his conscience. While walking through London's botanical gardens with his fiancée, Sarah, Pryor notices Spragg following him. When he approaches Spragg, he suffers a prolonged memory lapse. Afterward, he asks Sarah about his behavior during these episodes. She tells him that he acts normally, but his personality shifts. He becomes more pro-war and hostile toward those who haven't been to the front. Concerned that he may be developing a Jekyll and Hyde complex, Pryor begins to contemplate whether he should return to the front lines. Dr. Rivers reassures Pryor that, even if his personality is fractured, he doesn't have an evil side. Rivers explains that the blackouts are a result of Pryor's inner conflict over the war. Pryor, in turn, challenges Rivers, asking what repressed memory lies behind Rivers' own disability, his inability to form visual memories. Later, as Rivers treats Sassoon, who has been sent home again, he begins to realize that he is not immune to the homosexual desires that Sassoon has confessed. When Mac is arrested, Pryor visits him in custody, hoping to learn who betrayed him. Mac is convinced it was Pryor, since no one else knew his whereabouts. Pryor confronts Spragg and learns that, during one of his blackouts, he inadvertently revealed Mac's location. Pryor is devastated by the realization. With Mac in prison, Pryor's intelligence unit is dissolved. Though he's uncertain of his next assignment, Captain Manning, his lover, offers him a position in his ministerial department to keep him in London. Pryor declines, deciding that he must return to the front lines in France. The Eye in the Door, praised as a moving anti-war novel by Publishers Weekly, offers a profound reevaluation of the legacy of the First World War in British culture, particularly highlighting the betrayal of working-class and homosexual Britons by the government's war efforts. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.